Thanks a lot for joining us tonight. And thanks, Mike, for the invitation and Salt. I'm really happy to be here to discuss with you and Caner. I've been following this project in different angles since Mike, and it is amazing to see actually how, as an exhibition, it came out so beautifully. And so now we will dive into it. My first question will be about the process, like how everything actually started for you, for Caner. But I believe we shall start with you, and then we can continue with Caner.
Thank you, Elif. The project started almost a little bit more than 8 years ago by chance. We got introduced to Metin Erksan'ın, the film director's assistant, and I asked the question if she knew of any interesting early social realist films, and she mentioned one, Dark World. She said it was very difficult to watch because it had been so fragmented and destroyed by censorship and other things. So Caner and I started discussing it, and we started looking for copies online. And eventually we met Yılmaz Atadeniz, who is a film producer. He's no longer with us, unfortunately. And he had the rights to the movie. So we managed to get hold of an old Betacam copy of the movie. I don't know if you remember these cassettes. They were sort of professional cassettes at the time. And we watched the film, and it was really, really difficult to understand. And I think that was the starting point of the project. We kind of wanted to have the film become this fragmented. As you probably all know, the film was supposed to be a biopic over the folk poet Âşık Veysel. But the storyline kind of falls apart after about half an hour, and then there's this documentarist material and Atatürk's funeral and farming machinery, all of these fragments that didn't make sense to the original narrative. But at the time we had no information. All we had was this Betacam, which was a really bad copy of the film, and this film that didn't make sense, and that was kind of the opening.
Mike'la başta film üzerine konuştuk. Mike'ın çok ilgisini çekmişti. Karanlık Dünya. Proje çok kendi aramızda gitti geldi. Ne yapacağımızı çok bilemiyorduk bir süre. Sonra bu senaryo fikri ortaya çıktı. Sergide gördüğüm bir senaryo. Bu senaryo o zamanlar sanıyorum elimizde 3 kopya vardı başladığımızda. Şu an 5 kopyayla sergideyiz. Şuna karar verdik. Senaryo bu kopyalar arasındaki kıyaslamayı içersin. Bu kıyaslamayı yaparken de senaryoyla ilgili bildiklerimizi, elde ettiklerimizi, anlatmak istediklerimizi de objektif bir şekilde burada yazalım, bu senaryoda yazalım. Böyle çıktı ortaya senaryo. Onun dışında daha çok, yani çok fazla yazı olduğu, konuşarak olduğu, yani bir kere de çıkmadı iş. Hep bir yeniden yazma süreci oldu senaryo tarafında.
Ben başa doğru döneceğim. Yani nasıl başladık sürecinde aslında sonuçta söylediği gibi sergiden geriye doğru bakarsak 8-9 yıllık bir şeyden bahsediyoruz değil mi?
Evet, yani bir iki yıl aralar verildi. O aralardan sonra yeniden benim de senaryoyu toparlamam biraz zor oldu çünkü bazen 2 yıl aradan sonra ne yazdığını unutabiliyor insan. O yüzden mesela son kopya Mimar Sinan Arşivinde bulunan kopyayla iş rengi iyice değişti. Son dakikada sergiye bir 6 ay kalmışken yeni bir toplum ortaya çıktı. Bu zor kısmı da buydu zaten.
Senaryo daha detaylı gelmek istiyorum biraz da. Bir marka doğru döneceğim. So Caner was mentioning about the script and how that was also the challenging aspect. But we will come to there more in detail. While we are talking about the process, because we know that this was done like a very short-term project, and you also described it. And there are different actors who are fundamental to this process. You have interviews, you have like Elif Kamışlı'nın, who is a cinema historian. So would you like to also mention that?
Sure. I mean, as I'm sure many of you know, doing research on cultural history is particularly difficult. Not only in Turkey, in many countries, but there's some of the archives are not as accessible as one would hope. It's difficult to research material. So in the beginning, we were working very, very slowly. Yılmaz Deniz put us in touch with Metin Bode, who we tracked down in an old people's home, and he was the guy who actually censored the first version of the censored movie. He was the editor of the original movie. Metin Erksan'ın asked him to take the first editing steps to cut the film after the censorship board, which led it to And before we had met the film historian, Kaya, we were sort of looking at the film, trying to see if there are any clues. I mean, it was quite obvious that some parts of the movie, the narrative just suddenly jumped, and we suspected that there was something there that had gone missing. Also, Metin Bode told us that he had cut out scenes of poverty, he had cut out scenes where the wheat fields were very, very weak. These are kind of rumours that have been circulating in the literature about the film. And so we were trying to work out where would these scenes have been and where does the film jump. And at the very end of the film, there is this sort of very strange sequence, which is like a propagandist, where Âşık Veysel returns to his village. He's greeted by a doctor. There's a school. It's very, very healthy-looking Republican village. And we had our suspicions that this can't be right. So early on in the process, we went to Sibiryana, a field trip, yeah, to kind of see, is this the place? Could we trace that material? It's, as you can see, it's a very small village. There's obviously not a grammar school or a hospital or what have you. So we spoke to some of the villagers. Some of the older ones remembered the film team coming. So we started to understand that there are even fake parts of this movie. This was early on in the research. We even tried to track down there are a few sequences in the movie where the female protagonist and her lover spend the night in a cave. We tracked down the cave where the film was, so it was kind of detective work, but at the time we didn't know if it was going to develop into a project. It was more about we were kind of getting, not obsessed by the film, but we wanted to understand it, so this was kind of an option to do that. And then Caner came up with this brilliant idea of writing the screenplay of the film, the fractured, as we call it, the Frankenstein's monster.
Yes, I also wanted to mention, why are you using Frankenstein as a metaphor here?
For us, in our conversations, we kind of always thought of it as being a kind of Frankenstein's monster with different body parts that don't belong, that have been stitched together, and wasn't a very sort of, they weren't beautifully stitched together, so this kind of analogy of Frankenstein kind of worked for us as a way of sort of thinking about the film and what it was and how it was structured. the good thing about, and I'll let Caner talk about the script, but what was so interesting about Caner's suggestion to write a screenplay of the Frankenstein's monster was that we could use it as a kind of, if you like, a doctor's report to add whatever we found. So when we compared different versions of the film, we could sort of interject the information that we were sort of gathering.
Here I want to just ask Caner. Caner, şimdi Mike çok güzel anlattı senaryo kısmına nasıl geldiğimizi. Sen biz söyleşinde şey demiştin, yani zaten film alanında çalışıyorsun ve senaryo yazıyorsun. İlk kez başkalarının seyretmeyeceği bir senaryo yazdın. Ve bu benim için çok başka bir deneyimdi diye bir ifaden var. Hani bu işi profesyonel olarak yapan birinin böylesi bir zihinle proje yapılması ne demek? Bir de az önce aktardığım önce 3 film vardı, sonra işte 4 oldu, en son serginin dışına çok kısa bir süre kalan üniversite arşivinden bir kopya daha buldunuz. Kim bilir belki 6. kopyada bir yerlerde, şu an bilmiyoruz. Ve sen bunları büyük bir sabırla, titizlikle, eş zamanlı olarak işte bu dokümana dönüştürdün ve o aslında Metin'in aşağıda sergide, masada sergilenen kitapçık belki sergiden hatırlarsınız sol tarafta daha hareketli görüntüler, sağ tarafta da izleyicinin düşünebileceği ve işte bütün süreci sindirebileceği başka bir yer var ve orada senaryoda ana öge olarak karşımıza çıkıyor. Yani serginin çok temel bir parçası. Biraz bunlar üzerine bize anlatır mısın? Ne demek kimsenin izlemeyeceği bir senaryo üzerine çalışmak? Nasıl oluyor ve bu kadar detaylı analiz edebiliyorsun?
Şöyle ilk kez şunu yaptılar. Çekilmiş bir filmi izleyerek bir senaryo oluşturdum yeniden. Yani saniye saniye izleyip, oradaki bütün aksiyonu, diyaloğu izleyip senaryoya geçirdim. Bu ilk kez yaptığım bir şeydi. Sanırım da bir senaristin hayat boyunca belki hiç yapmayacağı bir şeydir. Şu çok farklı bir şey bu senaryoyu yazarken. Şey yok, zaman kısıtlısı yok. Yani var da yok. Bütçe diye bir şey yok. Çünkü senaryo, endüstriye senaryo yazarken televizyon piyasasında bir bütçe sorunu vardır, zamanlama sorunu vardır, sabahlamanız gerekir, işte başrolü düşünmeniz gerekir falan. Bunların hiçbiri olmadan bir senaryo yazdım ilk kez. Bu çok ilginç bir deneyimdi. Koşturmam gerekmiyordu. Koşturmam gereken dönemler de oldu son kopyadan sonra. O yüzden ilginç bir deneyimdi. İkincisi şu yüzden ilginçti, senaryo yazarı ben değilim. Bedri Rahmi'nin senaryosu. Şu da projenin esas şeyi zaten, amacı yorum katmamam gerekiyordu. Yani objektif olmam gerekiyordu yorumlarında. O kısım birazcık ayrı bir sorumluluk yüklüyor senaryo yazarken. Bunun okunacağını, arşivleneceğini bilmek, hiç çekilmeyecek olduğunu bilmek ayrı bir deneyim. Bu sadece okunacak bir senaryo. Film zaten çoktan çekilmiş. Bu arada dediğin şeye gelirsek belki bir 6. kopya vardır. Varsa da şey de vardır. Özel koleksiyonlarda çıkabilir belki. Çünkü en kapsamlı arşiv, Türkiye'de Mimar Sinan Arşivi oradan çıkmadıysa belki birinin deposunda, arşivinde bir yerden çıkacaktır. Aslında bu sergi biraz da bir açık çare giren, elinde olan varsa paylaşsın diye ama bir şey çıkmadı, belki çıkar, bilmiyorsun. Sana yeniden yazılır belki. Yani bir 6. versiyonu.
Sen bütün üzerinde çalışırken bunları karşılaştırmalı olarak ekranlarda herhalde izleyip eş zamanlı nasıl bir yol izledin yöntem?
Şöyle yaptım, önce detaylı şekilde, yani bu A, B, C, D, E kopyası, 5 kopya, bunların sıralamasında herhangi bir öncelik yok. Tamamen rastgele bir tercih. E kopyası sadece en son bulunduğu için eklendi senaryo. Bir senaryodan başlayıp, A kopyasından başlayıp, sanıyorum YouTube'daki versiyonu o, emin değilim. Onunla başlayıp senaryo oluşturdum. Sonra tam şöyle oldu. A kopyasının yanına bilgisayar ekranında B kopyasını açtım. 2 ayrı ekranda. Birini 1-2 saniye izleyip, diğerini de 1-2 saniye izleyip, aradaki farkları analiz ettim. Çok sorulan, yapay zeka desteği almalı, bilmem ne almalı falan böyle bir şey kullanabileceğim bir materyal yok elimde. O yüzden en zor kısmı, yani ortalama 1 saatlik 5 tane görüntüyü 1 saniye bazen kare kare izlemek. Çünkü şöyle bir şey, hem seste çok ciddi farklılıklar var, hem görüntüde farklılıklar var. Bu farklılıklar bazen o kadar ufak ki nasıl olduğunu çok çözemedim. Neden farklılıklar olduğunu. Bunların bazısı kopyaların yıpranmasıyla ilgili değil. Oraya bir müdahale olmuş. O yüzden başka çarem yoktu. Birazcık bunun çıldırtıcı bir işti. A-B kıyaslaması bittikten sonra A-C kıyaslamasına başladım. Sonra A-D, A-E. Ama bu yetmiyor. Kopyaların da kendi arasında kıyaslanması gerekiyor derken işte sergilenen iş çıktı. Böyle oldu. Teşekkür ederim.
Kendi yorumlarını yazmak istediğin zamanlar oldu mu peki?
Oldu, evet. Ama işte o biraz şey kısmı o işin. Süreçte çok şey öğrendik. Bazı şeyler biraz tartışmalı. Bazı şeylerden bir konuya kayabilecek şeyler. Ondan orada bahsedilmemesi, yani bahsetmek uygun olmazdı. Keşke yazabilseydik ama...
Belki başka bir proje.
Başka bir proje olurdu.
Olabilir, evet. So Caner was a comprehensive explanation about this working process, and you made the link, so somehow she was also another person who was helping with the research process, as you mentioned. I mean, to me it's fascinating that you never gave up. I really find it nice that somehow, you know, a very interesting meeting unfolded in all these years and came out as this comprehensive exhibition on one film. But I also want to mention here that this is not an exhibition about the film itself. I think it's important to underline that. I mean, you are not a film artist, and this film is this exhibition, Dark Road, is not actually talking about Âşık Veysel'in or all the other important figures, Bedri Rahmi, etc. Because the way that you approach this film as a material, I think it's very important, and it would be nice to hear your commentary about like how the film can, I mean, the film with so many attractive names can become only material for you. And before I forget also, I would like to mention about like why you, as Mike Bode, someone living in Turkey but not with a Turkish background, is diving into these archives. And I feel like it could be not only by someone like you, because all these other names are really, really heavy for us, but if you can talk about this,
sure.
I
think it's a very relevant and important question because in my practice I tend to work collaboratively, almost always, especially with people that are experts in subject matter. When I first heard about the film, I didn't know who Metin Erksan was. I didn't know who Bedri Rahmi was. I had no idea who Âşık Veysel was. And that gave me certain advantages because I didn't have the cultural baggage to filter everything through. I wasn't affected by these people. I've got to know them now. I know how central they are and how important they are to Turkish cultural history. But that naivety was kind of a strategic choice. But I would obviously not be able to do a project like this on my own. So working with Caner, who's coming from cinema and screenplay writing, and then later when Dilek Kaya came into the picture, who was an academic and an expert on censorship issues in 1950s cinema, it kind of enriched the project. But I could keep my focus on looking at the film not as a narrative that we were trying to reconstruct, but as a material object that we were trying to understand. So that, I don't know if Caner mentioned it in his answer just now, but we talk about the script being a kind of doctor's report over what happened. And it was never our intention to sort of romantically recreate the lost film, because we know from interviews that the censored material is gone, most of it, and the original film doesn't exist. There are sort of many versions of the film. So it was kind of it's a collaborative project, and it wouldn't have been possible without Caner, Dilek as an academic, and later Salt and Gülçen and Emirhan and the resources here to sort of take the project all the way to the end. Dilek Kaya came into the project quite a little bit later than halfway through. We'd come in contact with her because we'd been to a lecture where she was talking about the film. So we obviously introduced ourselves. And I think we kind of sparred each other. I think she got encouraged by the fact that we were looking at this obscure film that no one would have probably looked at if we hadn't chosen to do it. And she was writing about it, so she kind of started, I don't know, she almost became a partner in the project because she was sort of bringing so much more to the table and using her academic tools to do it. So she was sort of finding newspaper articles, letters, she had access to archives, she understood the historical context of censorship and how it operated. So she was sort of feeding us as we went along. And I think the project would have not been able to develop the way it did without her contribution.
She also has a wonderful text at the Soul's blog around the film. So if you are curious to read an academic perspective, it's like 50 pages article. I strongly recommend.
It's a fantastic text. The exhibition is not all-encompassing. The exhibition is designed to be a kind of, and you get exposed to the film and what happened to it. Dilek's text, we kind of see it as part of the project, is the kind of detailed report of the film, but it's obviously an academic text and not an artistic one. She even in the process, and this happened about 2 years ago, she found the original censorship reports. And we got really excited. We thought, right, now we're going to find out, after years and years of thinking about this film, we're going to find out what happened to the film. Which scenes were cut, because we've been wondering about it. But in fact, the censorship reports were very basic, and they were referring to paragraph this and that, not being specific about the scenes, but was sort of just saying that the film is being censored, or should be censored because it's showing Turkey in a kind of negative light, or the Republic in a negative light, which means that the producer was kind of self-censoring rather than the censorship board giving specific directives to what should happen to the film. And you must remember that Metin Erksan was like in his 20s, and Bedri Rahmi as well. Everyone was very, very young at the time. And after the film, they were expecting the film to go through because they thought everyone would love to see a film about Âşık Veysel's life. But when it sort of stopped and it got cut, they both left the team. So it was left in the hands of the producer to kind of save the film. And then, for you who've seen the exhibition, know very well that it went through censorship a number of times and got shorter and shorter and shorter, to the point that the film was too short and material had to be added. And that's what makes this film so incredibly interesting, because it's kind of in the 1960s where filmmakers were kind of playing with using documentaries footage and mixing. This was not done by an artist, this was done by circumstances, so it's kind of a very early subversive film, if you like.
It was like a desperate attempt to finalize the film so finally we can meet the public. I remember you saying that the funeral scene footages of Atatürk, they are actually only now in this movie, no?
Well, we haven't found, I mean, Dilek's been looking for this film, we've been looking for it, apparently, and I'm sure there are other copies, but until now, the sequence with Atatürk's funeral only exists in this obscure film.
Incredible.
Yeah. There are other scenes from Ankara, of course, but from Istanbul and Dolmabahce, there are also some scenes, but not these particular ones of weeping children. And so it's kind of, that was a surprise for us as well, that in this strange, obscure film we were looking at, we actually found something that's historically really important. Yeah.
I mean, you mentioned about these collaborations and how it would be impossible to actually realize this show without this collective approach. And I just want to open a parenthesis about how it's important, because in the art world, this ownership matter is really, really important, that most of the artists are very sensitive, and even if they collaborate with many other people to realize the project, it's always a very delicate issue, whom to mention, where to write. So I think choosing collaborations as a way of working and acknowledging and keeping the dialogue open. I mean, here I would like to join Caner. He's coming from you're an artist and he's from a professional film scene, but you have been talking about everything. So that's very particular, and I think, as you said, it's also really enriching the experience for you, but also for us as the visitors. Caner, bu şeyi sana sormak istedim. Yani Mike çok güzel bu işbirliklerinin ne kadar kıymetli olduğunu anlattı. Yani öncelikle işte seninle başlayan, sonra Dilek'in geldiği, sonra Saat ekibinin dahil olduğu ve bütün bu işbirlikleri olması aslında 18-9 yıl evvel işte içimizde uyanan heyecan bu şekilde karşımıza çıkmaz dedi. Ben burada küçük bir parantez açmak istedim, çünkü sanat üretiminde işte hani kimin söz sahibi olduğu böyle çok hassas bir konudur. Birçok sanatçı farklı işbirlikleriyle projelerini geliştirir ama orada hani kime ortaya çıktığında kimin ismi yazılacak, o işbirlikleri ne kadar işte vurgulanacak, bunlar hep böyle pazarlık konularıdır. Çünkü orada sanatçı, hani sanatçı olarak kendisini çizmek ister. Burada çok daha bir farklı, çok daha derin bir işbirliği görüyoruz. Neredeyse o alanın dolayısıyla hiyerarşinin kaybolduğu. Sen de konuşmanın başında söylemiştin, yani evet ben senaryoyu yazdım ama bütün bu süreçte diyalogumuzda devam etti. Yani birazcık bunun üzerine nasıl bir şey? Sanatçı eş yazarı olmak böyle bir serginin.
Beni rahatlatan bir şey, çünkü ben bu proje dışında da yazdığım senaryolarda tek çalışmayı sevmem. Biraz korkarım ve kendimi güvenli hissetmem. Senaryo özelinde şunu söyleyebilirim, yani tek başına çalışan bir yazarın tehlikeli bir şey olduğunu düşünüyorum. Projenin sağlığı açısından. En azından bir ortak birisi gerekli diye düşünüyorum. Burada benim bir kişiden fazlası vardı elimde. O benim için büyük şanstı. Ki bu senaryoyu ben sıfırdan yazdım. Var olan, yani burada bile bu ortaklık çok önemliydi. Michael vardı, arkadaşım Korcan'ın senarist. O bir okuma yaptı, kardeşim Cansu'da bir okuma yaptı, üzerinden geçtik. Seher'in, Sevda'nın notları, bunlar benim için önemliydi. Sonra yani Sabit elimden aldığımız şeyler, yeni bilimden çok önemliydi. O yüzden insanların varlığı beni her zaman daha rahat hissettirdi, her zaman olduğu gibi. Evet, hiç olmadı. Kimin ismi nerede yazacak, nasıl olacak falan. Bu ortaklık benim için çok kıymetli, bu proje özelliği.
Ve hep bir diyaloğa dayalı olarak, yani diyaloğun ve bu serginin şekillendirilmesi, hep bir paylaşım içerisinde
Evet, yani
gelişti diye anlıyorum.
ben bir şeyler öğrendim, birbirimizden bir şeyler öğrendik. O yüzden çok kıymetli bir işbirliği oldu.
Teşekkürler. Mike, I have another question to you. Why this work is different than journalism? I mean, maybe a journalist could do such a research, so how you would differentiate it?
Before I answer that, could I answer the previous question? Because I think it's a very important relative thing. Personally, I think any artistic project is research-based. If you're a painter doing painting, you're researching colour, form, your motifs. And a lot of artists today work with a research-based practice. They're looking at different phenomena, they're maybe looking at politics. I mean, everything's kind of permitted in this kind of more horizontal kind of workspace that arts come. And I think when you're working in this kind of quasi-hybrid academic research, artistic research, which I do, it becomes natural that this is not a solo project, this is a collaborative project. People get involved, people invest time, and there have been many people involved in this project, so and to acknowledge them is very important because it is a collaborative project. And then for your question about why is this not journalism, or let us say why is the exhibition not a historical exhibition, I think they're close, they're kind of related to each other, but journalists follow a certain kind of ethical code that we don't necessarily have to follow. A historical institution would maybe organize the exhibition as a timeline covering a lot of the facts, or as many facts as possible. We don't have to do that. So we're kind of like cousins to historians or journalists, but we can use different kind of logic. We can actually, which I want to talk about a little bit later when we look at the exhibition shots. But yeah, we work in a similar mode, but the logics of what we do are slightly different.
It's wonderful that you are working in this way. Yeah, I think from here we are slowly going towards the exhibition, because as you were, specifying if this was a journalistic approach, it would have a very different outcome, and also if it was a historical exhibition. But again, we have a film as a material in our hands, and in the exhibition, you decided not to show the full film. That's like one major choice. And then you organize the space in a way that there is like a section with the moving images, and it is more, let's say, where you can find all these visual footages. And the other side of the room is much more quiet, and it gives you some thinking space where you can just reflect on what you have seen or what you have read. As a visitor, I really enjoyed the installation because I think it's not holographic. And an artist works with this kind of material, I think it always has the risk of overwhelming the audience. And you can just start and then feel scared, leave the space. But here, my experience as a visitor was like, okay, I can stay here really, really long, and I need to escape and go back there to see the footage. So, why you wanted to bring the exhibition together in this way? How the choices in the space was actually helping you to tell your story?
Well, originally we thought we were going to work with the really bad quality beta cams. That was kind of all we had. When SALT got involved, and with the sort of the weight of SALT as an institution, certain archival doors opened. Culture played an important part in that, and we managed to find this image, or this tin with the original film, not the pre-censorship film, but the Frankenstein's monster. And thanks to SALT, we had it scanned, and we, as you can see in the exhibition, we're able to use quite high quality material. I think the exhibitions would still have been possible, but it would have been designed in a different way. But here we were able to take more space. The visual materials we also take more space, and we also found miraculously 20 minutes of lost footage that no one really knew about that existed in the tin. So this has been included in the exhibition as well. But to get to your question, we also contacted, also through the help of SALT, Bedri Rahmi's family estate, and were able to include an original painting. But to go to the question of the exhibition, I think it was kind of a collaborative process when we were getting towards the end and we were designing the exhibition. There were many people involved, and we were talking about focusing not on the narrative inside the film or the actors or Âşık Veysel's life, but trying to keep the focus on the accidents and the pressures and the conditions that the film was developed in. So we decided that the installation would only actually show the additional material, the material that had nothing to do with the actual film, the found material, the propagandistic ending, to kind of steer away from the film's narrative, because once again it was never our intention to remake it. And when it came to the rest of the exhibition, we wanted Caner's script to have a central part, because if the original film was not represented in the exhibition, it's represented in the screening program, which was being shown regularly, but also in the script. And I think creating this vacuum also gave the exhibition its focus, because I think a lot of people know these three great men, and you kind of approach this exhibition thinking you're going to learn about them, and in fact we're actually missing them. And I think that sort of was the thing that interested us in focusing on the film as a material object. When it comes to your question about the overwhelming experience of confronting research-based art, I think there's a very influential and interesting text by Claire Bishop called Information Overload, where she discusses that a lot of artists that are working with a research-based practice have a tendency to put all their empirical data into glass boxes and present everything. And we were very aware of this, that we didn't want to overwhelm. We wanted to sort of give clues and create sort of resonances between the chosen material and a thinking space, a space for the audience to sort of think, well, I wonder why, I wonder how, to ask questions to the material and not just be overwhelmed by it. So all of the installations have their little text tags. And once again, these are not historical tags or journalistic tags. Sometimes they're just fact-based. There's no French philosophical analysis. They are just clues to, as evidence. You become a sort of detective, which you always are as a spectator in an exhibition, but you're welcomed as a detective. You're given the space to explore the exhibition. So when we had a lot more material than we showed, we decided to kind of hold back and leave space for thought, basically.
Yeah, I mean, it's great that you position the audience as an active participant here, because I can also imagine all these different materials taking place in the exhibition. And it would be a very different display, a very different experience for sure. Caner şeyden yani böyle konuşurken sergilemeyle ilgili nasıl bir yaklaşımla aslında hani o filmi göstermeme kadar bütün filmi burada göstermeyeceğiz ama kamusal program kapsamında izleyici eğer merak ediyorsa görebilir ama hani burada işte kesilen ve bütün içinden çıkan sahneler ya da son sahneler, bunların yer aldığı parçalar ve Mike'ın da dediği gibi o daha izleyici dostu metinler. Bir tarafta da işte senin senaryo. Yani sen hem bu işin yapım sürecinde olan biri hem de bir izleyici olarak o mekansal yerleştirmeyi nasıl görüyorsun? İzleyiciyi orada nasıl konumlandırıyorsun? Belki sergiye geldiğinde yani gözlemlerinde bunun bir parçası.
Şöyle yani en başta Mike'la konuştuğumuz şey şuydu. Elimizdeki malzemenin tamam burada olması. Çünkü her şeyi sunmak ziyaretçi için gerçekten yorucu bir şey. Hep bu projeyi anlatırken hazırlık aşamasında ve sergiden sonra şöyle bir şey konuştum. İşte Metin Erksan'ın Karanlık Dünyası'nı, Metin Erksan'ı çok seviyorum. İçimde ne düşünüyordum sergi Metin Erksan'ı. Bedri Rahmi Eyüboğlu'nu çok severim. Sergi Bedri Rahmi Eyüboğlu'nu değil. Aynısı Âşık Veysel'i çok severim. Yani insanlar ilk buldukları isimle haklı olarak bir vakıf projeyi öyle algılamaya çalışıyorlar. Bu aslında tamamen filmle ilgili de bir proje. Tabii ki merkezinde film var ama filmin macerasını anlatan bir iş. O yüzden bunun kesitlerini görmesini istedik. Bunu tabii ki Mike'ın yüzünü çok önemliydi. Ben ondan çok şey öğrendim bu konuda. O yüzden bütün malzemeyi de ziyaretçi olmak değil de gördüğünün tadını çıkartması, sindire sindire içeride vakit geçirmesi ve yorulmadan sergiden ayrılmasını istemiştik. Bunu da başarmasını.
Evet, ne güzel. Yani bir yandan da çok hani üç kuvvetli isim, hepsinin kendi hikayeleri var ve hepsinin senin de dediğin gibi işte ayrı hayranları var. Türkiye için çok başka bir dönem. İşte daha büyük dinamiklerin kültür sanat alanını nasıl şekillendirdiğini, etkilediğini çok güzel örnekleyen bir malzeme bu film. Bütün bunlar bir araya geldiğinde orada hani her kuşaktan izleyiciyi bir yerden yakalayabilecek ve aslında onları yine senaryonun vesilesiyle böyle bütün o farklı anlatıların içine ucundan tuttukları yerden çekebilecek bir yanını da var. Ve bence bu sergiyi çok güçlü kılan eksmenlerden de biri. Yani böyle nesnelerin daha fetişleştirildiği bir dünyada o orijinal filmleri işte Mike'ın dediği gibi ışıklı kutularda göstermekte bir fikir olabilirdi ya da elinizdeki bütün orijinal malzemeyi. Ama bir izleyicinin nefes alması, işte o duvar metinlerinin karşısında kendini küçücük hissetmemesi açısından bence çok doğru seçimlerle ilerlemişsiniz.
Mesela
hep beraber.
Şeyi de bulduk mesela Mimars'ın arşivinden bunun bir fragmanı da çıktı. Aslında kıymetli bir parça. Hatta bazı yerlerde filmlerde kayıp olan parçaları fragmanla izleyip senaryoya geçirdik. Fragman da yok sergide. Çünkü eksenini kaydıracaktık işte. Yani filmi öyle çıkaracaktı, filmin hikayesini, filmin başına gelen değil, sadece ilgili parça olarak orada olacaktı. O konulmadı mesela sergiye.
Şeyi merak ediyorum, senaryo, şimdi sergi bir süre sonra tamamlanacak. Dijital bir yerde erişilebilir olacak mı merak edenler için?
Evet, bir web sitesinden erişilebilir olacak bütün sergi materyali.
Tamam, çünkü güzel bir kaynak. Dönüp bakmak isteyeceği bir referans edilebilir. Yani buradan böyle toparlarken sonuçta çok ciddi bir araştırmadan bahsediyoruz. İşte işbirliklerinin içte değiştiği ve aslında farklı araştırma yöntemlerinin, sanatçı pratiklerinin böyle çok uyum içerisinde ilerlediği bir çalışmanın neticesi. Burada belki böyle daha açık bir soru olarak Mike'a da ve sana da yönlendireceğim. Yani belki önce onunla başlayabiliriz. Araştırma bazlı sergileri bu genel güncel sanat dünyasında nasıl bir yere koyuyoruz diye onunla da başlayarak. So I was just looking up after Caner's contribution on how to approach the material and the space. I mean, this is an incredible work, collaborative, research-based, and it is presented in an artistic context. So, as an artist, like how you categorize this kind of research-based exhibitions, how you see them in the contemporary arts world, I just wanted to ask.
I think the contemporary art world now is so wide. It's everything from pure commercial activities to institutional art and everything in between. And I think I would categorize myself as an institutional artist, that I work with institutions. I mean, this is not a work that you can sell. It doesn't have any commercial value. It has informational value. It has experiential value. And I think, and this is not uncommon. I mean, if you look at the American contemporary art scene in the 1960s, I mean, you have a lot of, artists working commercially, but you have a lot of very important artists, Mike Kelly and other people that were surviving or working in the kind of university setup with university galleries in a non-commercial space. So I think moving, and this is just a personal reflection, but moving into a kind of more academic research field opens certain doors as a counteracting the kind of the traditional gallery relationship that artists have. So it's a kind of a necessity, and it's in a way it's about knowledge production rather than creating an investment object, or being exaggerating now, but it has a different kind of value system, a different economy around it. And I think in relation to SALT, I mean, SALT has a very interesting, I've always felt that SALT was a really interesting institution in Istanbul, because it has this kind of, it has archival work, it works with cultural heritage, and at the same time it works with contemporary art. So I think a project like this sits really well in here. It would have been interesting to have done this project in Âşık or somewhere where it was a traditional white cube. Maybe it would have looked more like art. Now it kind of glides between research and art, cultural heritage, which I think is really interesting. But like we were saying before, that this is not a historical exhibition about a film, it's not a journalistic. The decision making, which I think you feel in the room, are not made for that kind of logic. It's slightly different. It's been arranged in a different way. And that kind of excites me artistically. And I think this image is really good because this is the 20 minutes of found material that was behind the pornographic curtain, if you like. What fascinates me so much is that there's no violence, there's no overtly political messaging, there's no sexuality. It's kind of, there's a wedding, there's a field scene, and this kind of opens a really interesting door. Why was this material problematic? And I think the exhibition, having thought about it a lot now for the last 6 months, I think it functions on several layers simultaneously. Yes, it is cultural heritage. Yes, it is telling the story of what happened to a film and how it got censored. But it's also about exemplifying collaborative processes. It's also talking about the arrangement of things. I was schooled as a painter, and I see this work very much as a painterly activity. And of course, it's, you could say metaphorically, it's about the world we live in today and how things are being censored and self-censored by us all. So I think it sort of works on an experiential level, intellectual level, cultural heritage, and it kind of moves in this kind of hybrid space, which I think is the strength of this kind of work, artists who work in this sort of more explorative field.
Thank you. That was a very nice answer. Yani sonuçta sizler hani bunu daha böyle sanatsal bilgileri bir araya getirirken böylesi araştırma bazlı bir işi sanat kontekstinde okumak, görmek sana bir düşündüğü hissettirdi.
Şey çok ilginçti tabii. Bir senaryo yazdım. Ve bu bir serginin bir sanat eserinin bir parçası oldu. Bu ilginçti benim. Yani başlı başına o metin, o kitap, senaryo teksti, her neyse. Onun bir esere dönüşmesi heyecan verici bir şey benim için. Başka da bir örneğini görmediğim bir şeydi. O yüzden beni çok mutlu eden bir iş oldu. Böyle.
Yani şey de çok güzel böyle bütün anlatılanları dinleyince, yani filmin bütün hikayesi neyin çıkarıldığı yerine neyin konulduğu ya yani böyle o kararlar aslında arkasında bazen hani belki çok basit yani niye o düğün sahnesini çıkardılar mesela yani 20 dakika böyle ne var burada diye baktık sadece bir düğün sahnesi var. Şimdi niye bir düğün sahnesi çıkarılmak istersin? Ya da onun arkasından gelen işte o biçer döverlerin böyle okları tarlalarda yürüdüğü anlar vesaire. Ve orada yani film üzerinden alırsak ne çıktı, ne eklendi, yani o kararlar ne tarafından geliyor ama bir yandan sergi de öyle bir şey. Yani Mike'ın açıkladığı gibi bir yandan neyi gösteriyoruz, neyi göstermiyoruz, neyi neyle yan yana koyuyoruz ya da neyi dışarıda bırakıyoruz. Her şey bir anlatı oluşturmak üzerine. O anlamda da Mike'a katılıyorum. Yani çok farklı katmanlar var izleyicinin de kendi içinde akabileceği sergiyi gezerken. Ve bu noktada da bence çok katmanlılığı sağlayan şey hem sizlerin iki farklı alandan gelen kişinin Salt'ın Mike'ın dediği gibi yani burası çok özel bir kurum. Hem güncel sanat alanında sergiler üreten, yeni üretimlere destek veren ama bir yandan da inanılmaz bir arşive sahip çıkan ve bir yandan da o arşivi sürekli geliştiren, bunun üzerine de hani, uzmanlaşmış bir kurum. Bunların bir araya gelmesi, işte direktör gibi bir kişinin bir araya gelmesi ve bu dinamikten de daha birçok yani şu an ismini sayamadığım birçok farklı kişinin katkılarıyla bir araya gelmiş bu sergi sanki bize yani bu çok katmanlı anlatıların ancak böyle bir şekilde mümkün olabileceğini de söylüyor. Ve ben yine yani daha böyle sanat tarafından bakınca hani kimin neyin sahip olduğu gibi tartışmaların böyle çok alan kapladığı bir dünyada böylesi çalışma tekniklerinin çok kıymetli olduğuna inanıyorum. Hem seçilen özne için hem de onun etrafında kurulan dünyalar, o dünyaya temas eden kişilerin beraberinde götürdükleri için. I was just like working up, but that beautiful poster is looking at me, so would you like to say something about the poster? Posterle ilgili bir şey söylemek ister misiniz? Çok güzel bir poster, onun da bir hikayesi var çünkü.
Evet, bu poster Mimar Sinan Arşivinden çıktı. Bir orijinal poster. Dünya üzerinde şu an bir tane olduğunu düşünüyoruz. Şu an sergileri Mimar Sinan Üniversitesi'nin izniyle buraya getirildi. Bedri Rahmi eseriyle bu poster bir camın arkasına korunarak seyirciyle, izleyiciyle buluşuyor, ziyaretçiyle. Çok kıymetli bir parça. Gerçekten tarihi bir eser bizim için.
Çok güzel. Do you have anything to add? Would you like to share ister misin? Would you like to add something?
Maybe we can open up for questions if there are any.
O zaman eğer sorularınız varsa almaktan mutlu oluruz. Bu durumda geldiğiniz için çok teşekkür ederiz. Sergi 21 Aralık'a kadar devam ediyor. Yeni kamusal programlarda olacak. Çok teşekkürler.